Hello, my name is Marianne and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to welcome you to Recovery in Action Life on Life's Terms. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're all here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussion to their problems with alcohol. This is an open Big Book step study meeting where we discuss the 12 steps of recovery as they're written in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, with the focus on their application in everyday life in recovery. This is the fourth session of the fifth cycle of the workshop that was presented on February 24th, 2024, where we completed the resentment inventory portion of step 4 and began the fears inventory. If you would like to contribute to the seventh tradition, you may do so using the QR codes displayed. Contributions are applied towards the group's expenses and support our service offices. Recordings of the workshop are available, and if you would like to be placed on the distribution list, please send an email to recoveryinaction462@gmail.com to receive the links. These links are unlisted and not public. I request that you not share them at the public level or post on any social media sites. The workshop typically begins with a brief meditation in which an inspirational music video is played. Because of copyright restrictions, it cannot be on the video. However, a link is provided, and I suggest you take a minute, view the video, and take a brief meditation for yourself before you begin the workshop. As the recording begins, the workshop is already in session. Feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions or require my assistance further. I hope you enjoy the workshop. Another custom of this group is to start the workshop by saying the full version of the Serenity Prayer. We're all familiar with the first part, but many of us are unaware that there is a second part to it, and I believe it's this second part of the prayer that reflects what recovery is all about. So if you would all please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. The Big Book is the set of instructions on how to work the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are the set of instructions on how to get rid of those things that are. So, one of the things we need to get clear on, and is a common misconception, is that merely reading the Big Book without experiencing it is useless. You can't learn how to play the piano, how to tap dance, how to swim just by reading a book. You need to practice, 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 and practice. So when we get into the Big Book, we look at the cover page, which states that this is the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And I added that extra little whatever to it because sometimes our alcoholisms take us into other directions. But when we're talking about being recovered from alcoholism, and the definition of recovered is that the problem is removed. I do not have to make a choice whether I drink or not because I don't even think about it. I automatically turn to God instead of alcohol when I'm upset. It's no longer an option to solve my problems. Selfishness and self-centeredness are gone. I'm no longer angry, fearful, or harmful. My old destructive ways of thinking and acting have been replaced by new peaceful ones. Then when we get to the 10th step promise, which is on page 84, the 10th step promise, there's lots of promises in this book. We're mostly familiar with the 9th step promises, but this is the 10th step promise. And what it says is, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we find out this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it. Neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We haven't even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It doesn't exist for us. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react as long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. Then if we look at page 27, it gives a definition of recovered as ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. So that's page 27's definition of recovered. Then when we go into the appendix, in the spiritual experience, it describes recovered as being a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. And then we go to the forward to the first edition, which states, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. And it later goes on to say that the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. However, the desire to stop drinking is not the only requirement to become recovered. There's other things involved, such as being willing and actually doing everything that the big book says to do. So that's where we went from there, where we completed step one. And step one states that we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I gave you the unmanageability questionnaire where we looked at all of the various different parts of our life where we could see where there was unmanageability. And it hammered home the revelation that alcoholism is a disease, that I'm powerless over alcohol, that I am smitten by a mental obsession that causes me to give in and pick up a drink. And then once I pick up that drink, it triggers what they refer to as the phenomenon of craving, which is a physical allergy that once I start drinking, I can't stop. So now we know this about ourselves. However, we have self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is not enough to stay sober, and that's proven time and time again in the big book. Many people thought that self-knowledge, Bill Wilson himself, could keep him sober. He found out it didn't, because as a real alcoholic, the only thing self-knowledge does is make me realize that I cannot take just one drink without being physically driven to take one drink after the other. This then allows me the opportunity, if I'm spiritually fit, to pass on that first drink, and I can only do this on a continuous basis if I'm connected to my higher power, which brings me to step two. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And what that comes down to is, I make the admission, am I willing to believe that there is a power greater than me that can solve my problem? And I get to define what that power is. And again, we did some additional exercises and activities as we went through this. And then once we finished that, we went to step three. made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. The first three words being the determining point, in that we make a decision. We do not turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him in step three. All we do in step three is make the decision to do it. It's kind of like when I make a decision to enroll in college. Just making that decision doesn't give me my degree. I made a decision to do the work. I made a decision to fill out an application. I made a decision once I got accepted to register for classes. I made the decision to go to classes. I made the decision to do the assignments. We just make the decision to do the work that is necessary in order for us to turn our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And this is the third step prayer, in which we offer ourselves to God, and we're asking God that to help us. We're saying, okay, I'm yours, God. Do with me what you need to do. I just want to do what you want me to do. Cliff Note version. From there, we got to step 4. And that is, of course, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. You know how fear comes up a lot. And we talked about the 4-step inventory forms. There are 4 inventories when we do our 4-step: resentments, fears, and then harms. But there's 2 harms inventories, one excluding our sexual behavior and one including our sexual behavior. And then we started with our resentments, and we did the resentment inventory. We listed the people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. And we had the names directly from the big book. And then we asked ourselves why we were angry. And that was column 2 in the form. So we take our list from the big book and we listed why we were angry over here. Then the next part was found on pages 64 and 65. In most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relations, including sex, were hurt or threatened. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our inventories. This is why they hurt me. And then we looked at, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations that had been interfered with? So what we invariably found out that it was about us. Something about us, one of these parts of self had been hurt. And again, we're looking at the self-esteem as how you feel about yourself, your pride, your pocketbook, your money, your finances, or anything of a material nature, your emotional security, how safe you feel in the world, your ambitions, your plans for the future, your personal relationships, how you interact with others, and your sex relationships. So we got to get clear on those parts of self. And then we went into column 3, and on all of these resentments on our list, we checked off which categories they fell in. And then remember, the more check marks you have, the angrier you are. And then we turned back to the list where it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that this world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? So we put out of our minds the wrongs others had done, and we resolutely look for our own mistakes. And this is where we look at column 4, how I got that ball rolling. What was my part? And then we look back at our part, because what we found out was that, again, page 62 states, so our troubles we think are of our own making. So when we get into this column, how did I get the ball rolling? I'm looking at what I did. And then this is where we left off last week. The important part about column 4 is that it's all about you. It doesn't matter what anyone else did. You find your part in it, whether it was something you did, said, thought, or did not do, did not say, did not think, some action on your part. You want to keep it simple and not beat yourself up over it. And don't add any more than you have to. Keep it short and concise. You're looking for verbs that describe what you actually did that caused what happened in column 2. So look for how you got the ball rolling. Now, there is a disclaimer here in that in some instances, there might have been things that were not your part, that you didn't have anything to do with. Maybe you were molested as a child, or you were a crime victim, or you were raped, or your child was murdered, those kinds of things. And that would be the exception because you didn't have a part in that. But you might want to look at that from the perspective of what was my part. So maybe, like in my case, there was an instance where something happened, and what I did was I acknowledged that I didn't trust my instincts and I went with someone that I shouldn't have gone with. And therefore I had to look at, I was a people pleaser and I wasn't a good judge of character. I was going to just say, one of the things that I've heard in the program is they say, hurt people. And, and that those are some good examples as to how that comes about. And that's why it's important to be able to address those kinds of issues when they do come up. Okay, so that's why we do address it. It's important to see that this is not about victim blaming and anything like that. There are things where you didn't do anything wrong when it happened, but how did you react? Were you angry all the time? Did you hurt other people? Did you shut off relationships? Whatever that might be. So again, we're just looking at, remember, keep it simple and don't beat yourself up over it. And that's where we're getting to the next part, which this is a very, very powerful part of this. So you want to fill out column 4 in the inventory form and see where you got the ball rolling. Again, you want to keep it simple. Noun, verb. I, fill in the blank. I did. It should be something you said, did, or thought, or did not do, say, or did not think. And then you check to see if what you wrote in column 4 is correct. You're looking for cause and effect. If what's written in column 2 and 4 are correct, you should be able to reverse it using their opposites and say things that make sense and ring true for you. So this is the example. Now, remember here, you don't want to berate yourself about what you're writing in column 4. All you're doing is looking at the fact. And the fact is you did what you did based on your character defects. And when we get to column 5, you'll see that what you did in column 4 was all you could do at the time because a character defect came into play, thinking it was going to protect you. So just like you don't have to pay attention to which hand you brush your teeth with or how you actually brush your teeth, your character defects automatically come into play in column 5. And when we get to it, we'll show you that you're not a bad person. All you are is someone who has character defects who think that they're trying to protect those parts of self. So if you look at this example, you see I put a little part in here where we reverse the resentment. And this is something that's really powerful. I had to abbreviate here on the parts of self because we didn't have enough room on the form. But what we're looking at is what you want to say is if I had been, so here we are, Mr. Brown, we're jealous of Brown because of his attention to our wife. But my part was I was drunk and didn't come home from work and I stayed out all night. He told my wife of my mistress and I was cheating on my wife. Brown might get my job at the office, but I was drunk on the job. So let's reverse this now and say if I had been sober and come home from work, I would not be having an affair. I would not have been drunk on the job. And Mr. Brown would not be paying attention to my wife or telling her about my mistress or being considered for my job at work. So when you reverse that resentment, that can be really powerful because if I hadn't done that, that wouldn't have happened. Now let's look at Mrs. Jones. She's a nut. She snubbed me. She's a gossip, but I was drinking with her husband and I broke her table. Well, if I had been sober, I would not have been drinking with her husband or broken her table, and she would not have stubbed me. Same thing with my employer. My employer's unreasonable, overbearing, threatening to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account. But I was drunk on the job. I was a liar and a thief. I padded my expense account. I was not reliable. I came into work late, didn't do my work. So if I didn't pad my expense account, if I was reliable, if I came to work on time and completed my work and did not drink on the job, my boss would not threaten to fire me. And then my wife, she misunderstands. She's a nag. She wants a house in her name. How dare she? But I come home drunk every day and I spend my paycheck at the bar. So if I came directly home after work and was sober, did not stop at the bar and spend my paycheck, my wife would not misunderstand and nag me. So again, this is what we're looking at. It's all about you. You're looking for cause and effect. So if I didn't do what's in column 4, then the person in column 1 would not have done whatever was listed in column 2. And if I didn't do what's in column 4, then the person in column 1 would not have had the opportunity to do what was in column 2. Or if I didn't do or think what's in column 4, then it wouldn't have mattered that the person in column 1 did the action that we had listed in column 2. So, and if what you wrote doesn't make sense in either what's in column 2 isn't really what you're angry about, or column 4 might be incorrect. So you may need to work on it a little bit until it rings true for us. The next instruction is on page 67, which states, where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. So the 5 main character defects that we're looking at are, I was selfish. I wanted to keep what I have and I wanted things done my way. I was dishonest. I was a liar, a cheat, and a thief. I was self-seeking. I wanted more than I have right now. I was frightened and I was inconsiderate. And then those are the main character defects. And then we also expand upon them a little bit more. And this is a list of other character defects: the approval seeker, bossy, complainer, greedy, opinionated, people pleaser, rude, sarcastic, show up, all these other character defects. And I'm sure you can look up in the dictionary and find a lot more. But these examples show how to do column 5. Okay, so we kind of abbreviated this down. Column 5 has to do with what character defects allowed me to do my part, Was I selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, or other? So when I'm looking here, okay, with respect to Mr. Brown, I was selfish, I was frightened, I was inconsiderate, and I was jealous. Here I was frightened and I was jealous. So this shows you how to check them off in column 5. And I'm going to go through the whole thing. Here we have Mrs. Jones. I was frightened, I was inconsiderate, I was a people pleaser because I wanted her husband to like me. My employer was, here I am with my employer. I was selfish, dishonest, frightened, inconsiderate, and then I had a list here of being entitled, unethical, irresponsible, undependable, unhelpful, unreliable. Now we've got the wife. I'm drunk every day. I spend my paycheck at the bar. I listed all of these. I didn't give him a break at all with this, but he was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, and then I put a whole laundry list here. Thoughtless, irresponsible, disrespectful. He was a procrastinator. He was rude. He was undependable, unhelpful, and unreliable. So that is the other character defects. And then what character defects allowed him to not come home from work and stay out all night. He was selfish. He wanted to drink. He was frightened. He was afraid of what his wife might say or do. He was inconsiderate. He was inconsiderate. He didn't care that she was holding dinner for him and was worried that he might have had an accident or gotten hurt. And he was jealous of Brown. What caused him to cheat on his wife? He was selfish. He only cared about himself and his desires. He was dishonest. He was lying to his wife, and he might have been lying to his mistress. We don't know, but she might not have known he was married. He was self-seeking. He wanted more than he had. He was frightened. He was afraid his wife would find out. He was inconsiderate because he only cared about himself and didn't care about the consequences his behavior brought upon his wife or his mistress. On the, she was getting harmed too, as far as we can tell. And then he was promiscuous. He was engaging in risky sexual behavior, and he was lustful. So those character defects, we can really get deep into them, and we still have more. What character defects allowed him to be drunk on the job? Fear. He was afraid of getting caught and what Brown might say to his wife. He was jealous. He was jealous of Brown. What led him to get drunk with Smith's husband and break her table? Fear. He was afraid Smith might not like him. He was inconsiderate. He didn't care about Mrs. Smith's property. He was a people pleaser. He wanted Smith to like him. And I really gave him a laundry list here, being drunk on the job and padding his expense account. But he was selfish. He only cared about himself and that his boss and his colleagues were depending on him to be at work. He was dishonest. He thought it was okay to steal from his employer, both in resources, time, and work performance. See, when you're at work and you're getting paid for working, then you're actually stealing from your employer when you're not doing your work. So he was stealing from his employer in time, work performance, and resources. He was frightened. He was afraid he was going to get fired. He was self-seeking. He wanted more than he had. He was inconsiderate. He didn't care that his boss and his colleagues were depending on him, and that he needed to be at work because they had to pick up his share of the workload when he wasn't there. He felt entitled. He deserved the extra money from the expense account, and he thought he deserved to be paid for time not spent at work, as well as work that he didn't produce, which again is unethical, irresponsible, undependable, unhelpful, and unreliable. So he really got a laundry list there. And what made him come home drunk every day and spend his paycheck at the bar? Well, here we go again. Selfish. He only cared about himself. Dishonest. He was lying to his wife and spending the household money drinking. He was self-seeking. He wanted more than he had. He was frightened. He was afraid of what his wife would say or do. He was inconsiderate. He only cared about himself and did not care about the consequences his behavior brought upon his wife, family, and household. And then the others where he was thoughtless, irresponsible, disrespectful. He was a procrastinator. He was rude. He was undependable, unhelpful, unreliable. Now, I expanded on these a lot more than you really need to, but I felt for the sake of demonstration that it was helpful to have all of these character defects and see how these character defects allowed him to do the things that he did. So the way you do it is you fill in column 5. And remember, you're looking at what you did in column 4. So you're only looking at column 4 and you're ignoring everything that's written in columns 1 through 3. And then you want to start by asking yourself if the action you did in column 4 was because you were selfish, you wanted to keep what you had and wanted things done your way. And so you would put a check in the selfish column. Was it dishonest? You're lying, cheating, stealing. You put a check mark in the dishonest column. Self-seeking, you want more than you have right now. So you put a check mark in the self-seeking column. Frightened? If so, put a check mark in the frightened column. Inconsiderate, put a check mark in the inconsiderate column. And then other, you look at that list of other character defects that might be involved and list them as well. So the listing of the specific character defects are important because the big book lists mean, egotistical, indignant, self-pitying, self-centered, and self-delusional. And you want to see, you're going to see as we get into step 6 and 7, that includes the wording that we're ready to let God remove from us all of the things which we admitted are objectable. So all means all. And we're asking God to remove every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. So while every character defect falls within the major 5 or a combination of them, it's better to be more specific. So for example, people pleasing is really being dishonest because I'm not being honest with you because I'm behaving in a way that I think you want me to act, as opposed to being myself. Or self-seeking is being frightened all the time, and is being frightened at the same time, but people-pleasing gives a more accurate decision of what I'm actually doing. Another example, my one defect might be being mean-spirited, but in reality, it's being selfish, self-seeking, inconsiderate, and frightened all at the same time. But using the description of mean-spirited gives me the exact behavior to look at when I get to step 7. So the same, if you're anything like me, you may have experienced this, in that we repeat what we don't repair. So in reality, these same situations will repeat themselves because our character defects continue to play out the same way time after time. So for example, if you're a people pleaser, you're continually going to be in situations where you'll agree to do things that you don't really want to do, and you'll give people things you really want to keep for yourself, so you don't really want to give them, or you might not stand up for yourself because you want people to like you. What happens is you continue to be unhappy and wonder, why me? Why me? Why does this always happen to me? And it happens again and again because your character defects come into play. So it's not the person that's listed in column 1 of your resentment inventory causing your unhappiness, but it's the character defects that come into play. So if it's People pleasing, the good news is you don't have to stay a people pleaser or any other character defect for that matter. And as you progress through the steps, you'll find that in step 7, these character defects start to diminish. And in step 10, they can be removed. As a result, the problems caused by them vanish. So that completes the resentment inventory. So we're born with 2 fears, fear of loud noises and fear of falling. These are the only fears that we're born with. Every other fear is learned. And at this point in our lives, all of our fears have been based on 2 things. Either we're afraid. All right, so all other fears are learned and based on either one, we're afraid we're not going to get something we think we deserve, or we're afraid we're going to lose something we already have. And before I get into the fears inventory, what I want to do is I'm going to give us we're going to look at a brief video. Well, we'll probably finish up the rest of the session. We took a vote earlier, and it was the consensus of the group conscience that we show this video as it relates to the fears inventory. So you need to stop the video. Thank you so much for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And now, please join me in our closing prayer, which is St. Faustina's Prayer for Mercy. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. Amen.